in India, the top 10 people, 10 individuals, during the course of the pandemic, have grown their wealth to hold 57% of our country's wealth, as opposed to the share of the bottom 50% of our people, who actually have a share of only 13% of the wealth. This is predatory capitalism at its worst that we are seeing. Now, in this quest to control the government so that these predatory policies can be followed, the market political rightward shift is taking place in every country. This rightward shift in politics is to ensure governments that will promote neoliberal policies and at the same time disrupt the growing unity of the working people in struggles against this double whammy attack of the pandemic and the economic recession. And this disruption, the political right seeks through appealing to emotional passions, fostering divisive appeals, promoting racism, xenophobia, religious sectarianism, fundamentalism, parochialism, and in the Indian context, communalism. This rightward shift is to sustain this neoliberal order, at the same time to ensure that the unity of the working people in struggles does not reach levels where it can threaten the rule of capital itself. And that has to be prevented. This political rightward shift is the answer of the ruling classes. But this is being resisted. You have countervailing forces that have actually resisted and advanced. And the most classic case, inspiring case, is that in Latin America, where you have, in many countries, the left democratic and progressive forces, a combination of them, electorally defeating the political right and forming the governments there. As a digression from the written text, I can mention Chile. 50 years ago, when my generation was growing up, was the centerpiece of the launching of neoliberalism with the ouster of the Allende government and the Pinochet dictatorship that would come in by US imperialism. Now in that Chile, 50 years later, you have a democratically elected, left-oriented government with 3 members of the Communist Party of Chile holding very, very important positions. Yes, where people have united and fought, this can be resisted, and that has been demonstrated through the Latin American experience and also in some parts of the Europe, where in your Scandinavian countries, you have defeated the political, they have defeated the political right. But in this process, the quest for global hegemony by US imperialism continues to aggravate. In the post-COVID situation, this quest for global hegemony is sought to be directed to ensure that no country or no force can actually challenge US imperialism. And in that, the main target of US imperialism today is China. The global rise of the socialist China has actually posed this threat whereby US imperialism has shifted gear from this earlier strategy of containment of China to what it today pursuing, the isolation of China. And in the process of isolation of China, it's mobilizing all its allies, all its Western allies. And in this process, it is creating conditions in the world which will have serious ramifications for the social contradictions that exist in the world today at the international level. Now, when this has been going on, came the Ukraine war. Today is the 42nd day of this war in Ukraine. We have said the war must immediately stop. There must be a ceasefire, and through negotiations that must be done. But we must realize that this is a war actually between Russia and US and NATO. And Ukraine is the theater where this war is being waged. And this has been caused by the relentless expansion of NATO, which should not have existed after the Soviet Union's disintegration. Expansion of NATO to the Russia's borders, where they have 175,000 combat troops stationed on Russia's borders. All Eastern European countries have become NATO members except Ukraine and Georgia. This effort to make Ukraine a member of the NATO and pose the threat is the provocation for this war. And whatever this provocation, but the war must end. This must be ensured that there is no eastward expansion of NATO any longer. And this must be ensured, but at the current moment, the war continues to rage on. But the actual culprit behind this is the quest for global hegemony by US imperialism, which is the reason for NATO's expansion. Now, in this context, while this war has set in, many more developments that will have international ramifications, along with the US imperialism's thrust for strengthening its hegemony. In this context, the role of India has come into focus, with India consistently abstaining on all anti-Russia resolutions in the United Nations. During the last 7 years, particularly, there's been a trend happening earlier, but during these last 7 years, under this BJP rule, India was taken to a position where its status as a subordinate junior ally of US imperialism was cemented. We've joined imperialist alliances, imperialist military arrangements, and with lots of treaties, India became a junior partner of US imperialism. But with the war in Ukraine, the futility of taking up this sort of a direction in India's foreign policy of becoming an appendage to US imperialism, that futility has been thoroughly exposed. It is clear from these developments that India has to pursue an independent foreign policy, maintaining the supremacy of its own national interests first, and not becoming an appendage to any imperialist bloc. And therefore, the time has come for this Modi government to reconsider withdrawing from the Quad, which is a military alliance with USA, Australia and Japan, and with military exercises being conducted. India should start distancing itself from the Quad and should actually think in terms of exiting the Quad, because in these conditions of today, after the Ukraine war,